and to increase access, it will be shared with VSA and CC after this event. All right, so Malery, if you can introduce Susan, please.
So Susan is a Vietnamese American activist, playwright, and performer who tells stories that refuse to be forgotten. With a vision for individual and community healing, made possible through the interplay of comedy and drama, her work delves deeply into the lived realities of body insecurity, grieving, and trauma. Her first theatrical show, 140 Pounds, How Beauty Killed My Mother, is the unfortunate true story of how Susan's mother died from plastic surgery malpractice when Susan was 11 years old, and her search to find the man responsible for her mother's death. The world premiere was held in Seattle, February 2019, with a sold-out run, and VSA and CC have been in touch with Susan thanks to an introduction by Professor Nguyen since then. For nearly a year now, and we're so excited to be sharing this space with Susan and the Brown community tonight. And just to preface our conversation, we'll be sharing a 5-minute preview of 140 Pounds for everybody to situate themselves with the show and into their fields.
Thanks for the introduction, Malery. And here we go. Kids say stupid things to their parents all the time. What I didn't realize was that Friday, September 27th, 1996, was the last day I would ever see my mom. That morning, she went in for plastic surgery. A tummy tuck, the narrowing of her nostrils, and a chin implant, and figured she'd be home the next day with her beautiful new body. You know, Susan, people deal with death in all different ways. Have you considered a therapist? Trying to avenge my mom's death here. I really think this could be it. I'm a size 8 and I'm married up because he's Korean. The gold standard for Asian hotness. Oh, shit. Thank you for coming all the way from Rwanda. I love the vitamins. I'm definitely going to use it. You hung, what's happening? Hey, Ecuador. Oh, Ma, is that you? Last year, I retraced the steps of my mom's last day following the same exact schedule. I woke up at 5 a.m. and drove to the plastic surgery clinic. Merry Christmas, you filthy animals! Auntie Susan doesn't believe in toys, so you get a savings bond, you get a savings bond, you get a savings bond. Okay. Want some? You had this the whole time? You can reach them at 1-800-DIP. That's 1-800. Pretty as you wish. And the #1 customers for plastic surgery amongst the Vietnamese? Nail salon workers. How come you only want to talk about sad things? Why not happy things? Just trying to find out the truth. The truth? You only focus on how she died. Why not how hard she worked? 6-7 days a week? On the weekend? She do everything for you. Regular ticket, one try. Guaranteed ticket, all you can try. And she tried many times. For 1 month, we wait. Bakangay! Yodi! Bakangay, Yodi! Remember how you always used to invite us to go out and play? We always want to stay back and work? We'll come back and we're gonna play one last time. This Christmas, we can go to Reno and play that stupid game you like, Keno. And we can use all your winnings for the all-you-can-eat buffet for the family. Okay, you eat all my food, you make me cry, now you go home. I grab our 3-foot-long Hello Kitty doll, I throw her on the couch, I beat the shit out of her saying, this is what you do to me when you say I'm too fat. We meet in 73 during the war. The first thing I ever gave your mom was crabs. Excuse me? In Vietnam, when you give women crab, she won't marry you. And it would be really great if you could make it more obvious when you're around, but don't do anything creepy like write on a steamy mirror or anything. Don't cover up the story. Don't cover up the story. Don't cover up the story. I'll have the chicken feet. No, too fatty. How about the shrimp dumplings steamed? Good for you. You die from a tummy tuck and now you're telling me what I can and can't eat? I steal your mom. And I see everything. And I see when you're smoking the pot, you get all the high. Then you eat one bag potato chip, and then you sad you cannot wear bikini. And cut the avenge my mom stuff. Not cute. I don't like. When you're a little girl, what did you want to be when you grew up? What did you love about me? Does it make you feel sad when I hate my body too? When I light incense for you and ask you for help, does it really work? How would I know for sure? If I have a girl, how do I make her love her body? When can you hold me again? I come from a family of hustlers, spirit channelers, and survivors, and I'm not gonna let one negligent man control my destiny or my mother's story. I'm 140 pounds. She was 140 pounds, and so much more.
So that was an excerpt of my show, my one-woman show. And we thought it would be really fitting to actually start tonight's program off with a reflection exercise. And what we wanted to do was, you know, in watching this, even though you weren't able to see the entire piece, what was it during this excerpt? Was there anything that just really resonated for you? Was there a particular scene? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take, if you can get a piece of paper and a pen, we're gonna have 5 minutes for you to do this reflection. And I want you to think about, was there a scene there of something that I had said? And what memory did that trigger for you? Was there something that happened to you in your childhood, in your family, in your experience in school? Was there something that really tugged for you? What was it? And I want you to drop into that memory and start writing about it. Who was there? What did you feel? And what did you remember? So I'm going to set the timer for 5 minutes and we'll come back as a group. 1 minute left. Wrap up your final thought. And here we are.
Thank you so much, Susan, for leading us through that reflection activity. We would like to invite people, if they feel comfortable doing so, to share their thoughts in the chat. If not, that's totally cool too. But we do want to remind individuals that this chat is open as a space for connection throughout the event. So feel free to share your thoughts, your reactions, and engage with others throughout this Q&A and throughout the Ask Me Anything portion at the end, because we really want to make this a space of connection. So we'll now move into the moderated Q&A portion of the event. So to start off, I was interested in exploring this idea of memory in the past that you brought up, Susan, in this reflection activity, because thinking of memory, of the power that memories hold with us today I think is a really interesting concept, because on one hand, the past can empower us, but on the other hand, reflecting on the past can be a difficult experience, and navigating that experience can be tricky. So could you share your thoughts on this idea of the past as power?
Oh yeah, 100%. You know, I think, you know, my parents are Vietnamese refugees. They are both people that came over in '83. And talking about the journey that that when they came over, they don't want to talk about it. They don't want to talk about it. We just want to move on. Why think about the past? You need to move on. And that was always the recurring phrase in my family's household about where we come from, about my mother's passing. And it left a lot of unresolved feelings for me because I didn't know where I came from. But I saw how painful it was for my father, my aunties, so many people. And so oftentimes we can look at the past, we can look at this trauma and go, gosh, like, it's created a void. It's created a void in the relationships I wish I could have with my elders because they don't want to talk about it. And I know I should be proud of who I am and where I come from, but how can I even do that if I don't even know where I come from? And so there's this fundamental generational disconnect that has both sides wanting connection, but no one can meet each other because of the different trauma that each side is holding on to. And so when I was approaching my work, for me, the reason why I started doing all of this was I just wanted to understand my mom so I could understand what kind of mom to be. And the more I started going deeper and deeper into the work and refining my family story, I started realizing, you know, when I'm able to see the arc of where we come from and see it as a place of power instead of this place of so much shame of coming from poverty, of coming from so much death and war, instead of like all the sad things, if I can see it as this powerful thing, it can guide me into my future, into a place of pride. Because constantly in America, being Asian American, we are always othered. You know, and you don't have to just be Asian American to be othered. You can be othered in so many different ways. And oftentimes we can look at our identity and our past and see shame and feel embarrassed almost of where you come from. But when we can reframe that narrative and have it come from a place of power and pride and saying when you walk into a room, you actually deserve to be there because of the lineage you come from and the sacrifices they made for you to get here in the here and now, whether that's Brown University, whether that's, you know, being able to work remotely from home, we come in with a lot of privilege. And when you walk into that room, you're saying, I deserve to be here. But I think we can only do that if we are aware of the narrative that we constantly feed ourselves. So instead of seeing the passive, oh, I'm a child of refugees and there's a lot of trauma and, you know, and my parents don't want me to be this and that. And like, we can fixate on all this other stuff and you'll be sitting in that feeling. And it can be very disempowering. And it doesn't mean that those things aren't true, but if we can look at our past as power and find this new source of strength, the conviction of what our parents went through to get us to here, perhaps our present moment and the things that we want can come from a different place. And I want people to see their past as power instead of something they're ashamed about.
And so building off of that and in your own experiences, 140 pounds is such it's such a powerful work, and it evokes a lot of emotions for people. And I imagine that it was an incredible experience to put together and required a lot of your own thinking and of your past as power. So could you talk a little bit more about how you've brought this idea into your work and the paths that led you to, you know, create 140 pounds?
Yeah, I mean, my total honest answer here is I was just afraid of being a coward in front of my kids. You know, when I was like, I've always felt a calling to be a performance artist. Growing up, my parents owned a nail salon. And so I felt like I was always entertaining the customers ever since I was 6 years old, like trying to get them to buy more services or schedule another appointment. Like for me, inherently, my personality is to be a performer. And I had dabbled in performance here and there, like with some stand-up comedy and, you know, different performances and things. And I just always felt like I was too late. Like, why am I even trying to do this? I looked around when I went to another Ivy League school and they were just like, all the other classmates, they just had so much more experience. So I always felt too late. And then I got to a point where after I got married when I was 30, and all my aunties, my dad were just like, you're not getting any younger. When are you going to have baby? You know, and I'm sitting here going like, I want to make sure that when I have my kid, I can say this Hallmark statement, do what you want in life. Believe in yourself. But how could I say that if I didn't do it for me? You know what I mean? And so for me, I was like, okay, Susan, you just got to get it all out before you have a baby. Okay. And then I just started, you know, coming back to performance. I started working on my one-woman show. And in the beginning, I was going to do like weird stuff. I thought Andy Kaufman was really cool and he was like so weird and crazy. And so I wanted to do weird and crazy things. And I was working with a coach and she said, you know, that's cool. But it seems like when you talk about your mom and your family, that there's something like really intense that I see underneath there. And I was like, well, it's like, it's our dirty laundry. Why should we talk about that? Like, I don't think anyone wants to hear about it. I don't want anyone to feel sorry for me. And like, it was the past. And frankly, I don't even know that much about her. But because there was so much mystery around it, because there was actually a lot of like intimidation and apprehension and caution, like I was just, because I felt that tension and resistance of don't do it, there was something there. So I created one show, it was 25 minutes long, and I performed it. And I remember afterwards, I asked my husband, I was like, how was it? And he was like, babe, you were like crying like 90% of the time. And I was like, so was that good? Was that bad? But the point here is I did something for me. And that was the first iteration. I call it episode 1. I did 3 episodes. The first question answered, why was I angry? And like, what was unresolved? The second one was, who was mom? And the third one was, tell us about your bodies, her body, your body. And then I took these 3 pieces and I've been workshopping them, you know, getting real audiences, getting live feedback. And then I burned it. I burned it all. Because I was like, am I telling the story that I would want my children to see, that I would feel proud of? I found another director and I like propped it back up. I wrote it in a few weeks and refined it and performed 10,000 words. And then that was the world premiere in February 2019. So it was kind of this thing that kind of just started as I need to prove something to myself. And once I just get the bug, just like get it resolved, then I can have a baby. I can move on with my life. But the more I kept doing the work and what it was changing for me in my relationship with my dead mother, and also changing for all the audience members that would come and see the piece, and there was like this form of like cathartic healing going on every episode. I realized I'm not doing this just for me anymore. I'm doing it for us, to showcase stories about the immigrant experience, about being poor, about death, and how we don't get taught on how to deal with grief. And I realized this calling that I had, that there was a space there for me. But because there aren't a lot of Asian American artists producing their own work right now, it's like I just had to throw a lot of things to the wall and just see what stuck. And here I am.
I think that's one of the reasons that you're so inspiring, Susan, just because in the Asian American community, we never really get to see these stories told in such a visceral and present way. And something that a lot of people in the audience have been mentioning in the chat was this idea of being second generation or generation 2.5, and having this quote unquote dirty laundry that you mentioned earlier, this dirty laundry in our family stories, and the inability for a family to talk about it, or for the inability for us as this generation to really unpack these stories. And so I think from what I've heard from a lot of people my age, like we want to be able to unpack this and think about it more critically, but it's so hard to. And so as a storyteller who has gone through this process, how can we claim power within these narratives if, it's something that is just so difficult to talk about? And how do we like get that start into storytelling and perhaps claiming these stories as our own?
Yeah. Well, the first inclination here is if you don't tell it, someone else will. And it might not be the narrative you want to be told. So we look at the piece Miss Saigon, right? And Vietnamese people are presented as victims. And oh my God, white man savior helps me. Thank you so much. Never do we see the Vietnamese people as heroes, as agents of fiery change and courage. Because who was that written by and who was it written for? Why? So here, as a 1.5, 2.5 generation, the question is you are a part of this legacy about this like amazing journey to get to here and now, to be sitting right here. And you can tell that unique story that is yours. But of course, you don't want to bring shame. You don't want to call anybody out. You don't want anyone to feel embarrassed. You don't want, God forbid, your parents to yell at you, because they'll always find reasons to yell at you. So how do you present the truth? And, I remember working with my director, Sarah Porkalov, and I would write, she was like, so what do your siblings feel? And I said, well, they don't tell me anything. So, they act like this and that. And then she's like, okay, you're demonizing them. You're not showing them as this 360 character. Your job is to humanize them. And that's it, is that we're all imperfect beings. And when you can be very specific about your flaws, very specific of your deepest desires, then you're presenting truth, right? And I think the more that you can be truthful in what you're doing, the more specific you're in what you're doing, then the more you can resonate with your audiences, because they can find something, they can like zero in on something and be like, oh, I get it. Or that's just unlocked something new for me. So then as a storyteller, you're giving the gift to yourself and to them. But you have to ground it in truth. So if you watch my show, I don't say there's only the good guy and there's only the bad guy. I show how we're all good and bad guys all the time.
Oh, okay. So it looks like Susan just cut out for a second. She should be joining us back soon. you know, as we're waiting for her to come back, I just want to, oh, here she are. Welcome back.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry, I think the power just went out at my house, even though the lights are still on. So anyways, the computer just, everything's gone, but my phone works. So I'm still here. But that was a dramatic ending, wasn't that? Whatever I ended.
Was.
What was I
Want
just
to
saying?
finish?
We're
Well,
good and bad people.
Right. So I think the question is when you present stories about your family, if you present it in a one-dimensional way, it's unfair. You know, everyone's a full human. And so I think the extent in which you can show truth and humanity through being specific is what's going to count. You know, I think you should always check in with your intentions. Like, what am I trying to get out of this? Like, if you have just like, if you're just like really super angry, like really angry, and you're too close to an event, you might need some space and time to start processing that, maybe with a friend or a therapist or through your own journaling. So I am working on a memoir right now, for example. And there's this one book called The Art of Memoir by Mary Carr. And she said exactly that, which is if you are just too close to that event, you might not have the space and the distance to be able to create the world in a fair way. So I think that's just something to check in about.
I think since we're on the topic of storytelling, I definitely know there's a few of us in the group here, myself included, that are just really interested in kind of maybe both the mechanics and the personal like ethics as you work through storytelling. I really appreciate you saying like check in with your intentions, being very specific, thinking about kind of the underlying why and why you're doing this. And I thought this also might be an opportunity. I know there are a few people who submitted pre-submitted questions, and Caitlin, I know you wanted to pose a question to Susan. This would be a really great time to bring in your project and talk through what you were thinking.
Yeah, thank you so much, Susan and Professor Nguyen, for this opportunity. I'm so excited, and I went to your screening on Saturday and just cried so much. So it's been really moving, but I'm working on a project right now about my great aunt's life. And she was born in Vietnam in the 1930s. And I've been trying to trace what happened since then and her whole story. And so it's been a lot, and it's been hard because of a language barrier and cultural and generational differences. And I've been struggling with, like Professor Nguyen said, sort of the ethics of presenting this story. Like, how do I represent this life that I have no conception of? I've never been to Vietnam. I've never, I can understand the language, but I don't even really know how to like read and write it. To portray like a representation of somebody whose story I don't completely will ever understand. And I found myself wanting to sort of project my own, like I wanted to like be empowered myself, I think, in the process. And when I heard, you know, the ways that she was like, for example, she was married off, and she didn't even know it until like the day of her marriage. And I would ask her like, why didn't you say anything? Like, did you? And she would just basically say like, oh, I didn't know. Like, I just did it. And that was a lot of the response. And so sometimes I find myself like not knowing how to shape this narrative that gives power to even these instances where she would say, I don't know, I just kind of went with it. I don't really know. I don't know looking back. And so there's kind of like a lot of questions here. I know this is a lot right now, but I would love to hear what you might think about the ways in which we can portray the stories of other people in which we never will know what Vietnam was like personally, in 1930, at least for me.
So wait, is she still alive?
She is still alive. Yeah.
Okay, cool. And are you like doing like a short story? Are you just like trying to be a historian for your family? Do you want to publish? Like, is this a memoir? What is this, creative nonfiction? What kind of bucket are you putting this in?
Yeah, I'm trying. Okay, so I have definitely gone through like iterations of this, but I think right now I would love to like produce like a sort of creative nonfiction. I don't really know the genre-ish. Like I kind of want to push back actually a little bit against genre, because memory and history, like I'm trying to figure out the intersections between both too. Like which one do we privilege as a historian? Which one do we privilege as an artist? Where does ethics come in about that? So I want to produce a book about it, and I'm working on that right now, but it's so intimidating to even say that. Yeah.
Yeah, I got it. So I had a couple ideas for you. The first one is to have a prologue, right? In the beginning of it, just saying like, hey, this work is based on interviews that I've collected from my great aunt and other family members, to the best of their memory. And when necessary, I say when I infer my own thoughts. So you could, Marie Carr calls it perhapsing. You lay out the story and go, perhaps she had done this because of this, and then you can segue into your own reflection of it. So it's like how you make it your own memoir within her memoir. And you're also delineating when you're doing that, right? The second one is in the prologue, you can say this is creative nonfiction. And this is based largely on her life, and I've taken some liberties. Like no one is ever saying like, wait a minute, I need you to be a historian and get every date and every moment correct. And like, no, you're going to be weaving a really interesting story. So it might not ever be exactly like this, right? And if that's your intent, great. The second thing, it's probably the fourth thing. The fourth thing is finding a way in. I think I talked about this during the Saturday screening, but you could ask, well, why didn't you say anything? Or you could say, hey, what did your sister think? Or like, whenever you got to visit back home, like, did you have any conversations with your mom about this? You want them to, you need another way in, because I find with Vietnamese language anyways, it's like being able to say like, why do you have intergenerational trauma?
Yeah.
Like, I'm never going to get an answer, right? I'm never going to, but if I just say like, oh, after your mom died, did your siblings talk about it? It's a little bit different. Or so when you were a teenager and your siblings weren't there anymore, like what did you do for fun? Find another way in, and then they will say things to you without saying things to you. Vietnamese language is very poetic and it's very indirect as well. And so here's the problem is, as storytellers, we just want, hey, give me the details. I want to be accurate.
Right.
But how do you be in the art of indirectness? And I think that's being able to come in a different way. And the final thing I had for you was, you're talking about language barrier. You're talking about, I'm pressing and I'm not getting what I want. Are there other family allies that have other perspectives that can add other color that you could possibly interview? Are there some that understand, like I have very broken Vietnamese, okay? Yeah. But I have one cousin in Vietnam, where I will ask her questions, and then she can just translate me somehow and ask it a certain way, and it's so good. But she gets my brokenness, but she also gets my intent. So can you find some like cheerleader ally supporters in your family network that is totally excited about this project and be like, oh, that's what you want? You should also talk to this guy, and find other people in your court. So it's not a lonely project, but also they can help you with another way in. Someone had mentioned that, the Vietnamese that we speak in America is 1975 Vietnamese. It never then changed over time, that the way Vietnamese language in Vietnam has changed, it's been like 25, 45 years. And so I know, maybe I don't know where your great aunt lives today, but the point here is, if you tap into other people, can you embrace the language differences, but also find cultural translators. And I know that might hurt because you're like, but I'm Vietnamese. Why do I need a cultural translator? But it's different because times have changed. And is there another way in this poetic world of words?
Thank you so much. Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, totally.
I think one of the other audience questions that builds off something that Caitlin mentioned too about like genre and privileging memory or history is thinking about how many of us here feel kind of in between maybe arts and academia, or maybe just like thinking about how to work in personal experience and kind of academics. Where does like our identity fit in? I think one of the specific question was thinking about how can personal experience be turned into academic strength. I was just wondering if you had like thought about or advice thinking about like moving between arts and academia, or even just on that. And feel free, anyone in the chat too, to pull up any or to bring up any specific questions about that too.
Yeah, I mean, like, I never had that intent to go into it from that angle. But something interesting did happen this year. So this Harvard junior, her name is Leanna Chow, she reached out to me and said, hey, I want to write a paper on 140 pounds, like a 30-page paper. I was like, okay, well, what are you going to write about? And she's a Hist and Lit major, and her work was called Embodiment of Refugee Trauma and of my work and the contradictions of using storytelling for healing across generations. And so that's her major, is Hist and Lit. And she was able to dive deep into that. And I thought that was quite interesting because I had never known that there's Asian American journals out there that are studying performance and what does that say about the refugee narrative. So I'm not sure if one of our organizers can pop it into the chat, but I asked her if I could share her works cited with all of y'all. And then you can see other professors that are writing about this work and where she got her sources. And she was also open to chatting with anyone who was interested in continuing that conversation because she's trying to navigate it herself. I know with a lot of different universities, ethnic studies, Asian American studies, like it's an ongoing battle at a lot of universities. But I know that there's hunger out there. And I think if you can connect with more students that are doing this work and seeing like, okay, who's out there? Who's already written on this stuff and is established? And how do I contribute to this conversation? Incorporate that into any future papers that you're going to be writing. Incorporate that, like, hopefully this pandemic is over someday and maybe you can go study abroad and go to specific countries that you want to and study the things that you want to. So I think it's absolutely possible to incorporate your personal identity into academia, whether that's your current undergraduate studies or possibly, if you want to be a professor one day, which I hope you do, because there will be more students like you hungry to learn more.
I think we have time for, before we kind of wrap up with the last question, I think Malery, you had a few like other specific audience questions you wanted to bring up.
Yeah, we had an audience question specifically about thinking about the Asian American body in performance art and how you, Susan, may view your body as a medium for storytelling and healing. I know Christian wanted to pose this question themselves, and I don't know if you wanted to unmute yourself and speak.
Sure. First of all, thank you so much for all your wonderful, meaningful work. My question was mainly about this notion of beauty and how it's very pervasive. It affects everyone, men, women, but especially women of color. But I've also noticed this trend among feminists, in academia, that there's this paradox between wanting to subvert conventional beauty standards, but at the same time be a part of them, be beautiful. So I was just wondering what your perspective on that was and how we can navigate that sort of really, really paradoxical situation.
Yeah. I get this question sometimes. And the first thing is, who are you doing it for? Why are you doing it? I remember growing up, my godmother had said that no one, after my mom died from plastic surgery, she said to me that no one's ever going to love me unless I lose weight. I think I was like 12 at the time. And it's like, there's certain memories that happen in life that get seared in your brain. You can't ever undo it. And so for the longest time, I've been very paranoid and always trying to lose weight and I never see beautiful when I look into a mirror. And I've been starting to just do research about the history of the woman, the female body, and the role of women. And in Vietnamese history, I mean, it wasn't long ago that they were just still seen as objects, right? And that you're going to get married off and you're kind of a burden for your family because they need to like present a dowry for you. And it's hard because you're just seen as an object, right? But in that context, that is why my godmother would say something like that. It's because your beauty was what you were selling. And that was one of your assets because you weren't allowed to finish school. So really it was, how good do you look? And so when I replay that memory in my head, I'm starting to try to do it with a different lens, one that isn't so painful, right? Of that she just thinks I'm not enough and that I'm not a valuable person and I lack a lot of self-worth because of who I am inside. And if I can see her saying something to me because she's trying to protect me because of what they grew up around, that of what was normal, that's different. So given that context, when we talk about beauty standards and the desire to look a certain way, to use filters on your pictures, I think the question is who are you doing it for and why are you doing it? Now, if you're like, hey, I'm going to pull like an AOC and put on some like amazing red lipstick and just feel like badass right now, you do you. If you're doing it for you, you do you. But if you're doing it because you're wondering, this is the only way that people will find me attractive and I'm not sure if I'm going to be enough, or I'm not sure if I'm going to be accepted, or, or if it comes from this place that makes you feel small, just be aware of that. I don't think the ideal world is everyone not wearing makeup and like we're all wearing burlap sacks and it's like it looks like like from like the Matrix when they're just like it's like bare bones. It's not about that. I think your body and your face is still your palette for making choices of reflecting who you are. And so if you want to do that, go do that. But I think the question is who are you doing it for and why are you doing it? And if it's not an answer that you're proud of, unpack it and keep unpacking and find out what it's about and get to that raw space of what that's about so that maybe you can shift and get to a new place. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it was very insightful. Thank you so much.
So I think as somewhat of a wrap-up question, I know there were a few other questions that actually pertain to thinking about like life paths and your work as an artist, but I thought we could save those for are you joining and rejoining as a Zoom?
Yeah, the power came back to my computer and I'm tired of holding my phone. So.
Yeah, okay. Like, where do I look? Yeah, so we're just going, so I thought in the AMA we can transition into like asking more specific like artist work, life path type questions. But I thought like as we wrap up this more kind of conversation about like storytelling and beauty and the specific 140 pounds work, one lingering question as a way of conclusion is thinking about creating spaces of vulnerability. How do we do this? How do we create these spaces of healing and empowerment, especially thinking about these spaces when we're maybe not able to get together in person or with our own specific communities?
Yeah. I mean, part of it is doing the internal work, right? and having the safe space to do that internal work about how you are feeling about things. You know, earlier we were doing a reflection exercise of being triggered by a moment and like dropping into that and realizing, God, you know, the past can still have a lot of power over us. And so I think for, you know, it's about doing the internal work. So what does that look like? Is that sharing a story with someone that you've never shared before, like something that happened to you that you've never told anybody? Maybe that's what it looks like, is about that release where you don't have to hold on to it anymore. Maybe that looks like having a therapist. I have so many therapists and I love it. I have a personal therapist, a couples therapist, a massage therapist, and a physical therapist. I have a support team because our bodies and our minds are things that we're supposed to take care of, to feed, to manage. And so maybe with something that you would like some healing around, do you need a professional to create contained space for you that doesn't feel like anyone's ever going to penalize you for sharing something? Because I know when I talk to my family about stuff, I get penalized, and it doesn't feel safe to do that. So that's the first thing, is the internal work for you to even know how you feel about stuff. For me, I'm an extrovert. I process out loud. And for me to do those shows, when I did those shows and said those words, even later, like months later, I'll reread the script and be like, wow, I do feel that way about that. I didn't even realize that, you know. So there's something about verbalizing and space and then more reflection around it, because sometimes it's not linear. You're trying to do the work of your subconscious almost. And so sometimes you just have to get it out and start, and then you'll have clarity as you go. So that's the internal work. The second thing is the external work, which is having community. We're in a pandemic. We don't get to see and hang out and have club meetings and do all the things that we used to have. But what we can have is some form of accountability and community. So here, I mean, all the people who registered for this event, this is a self-selected group of like saying, this is important to me. Maybe have every twice a month meetings or once a month meetings where you create space, like just like a 1 hour Zoom or a 2 hour Zoom where you have space where it's just quiet time for writing. And if people want to share the work near the end and everyone gets 5 minutes, do something like that. You know, I think now that we're living in the world of the virtual, it's like, how can we use these tools to really support our needs? And here, what's kind of cool about virtual stuff is I don't have to like drive somewhere and park and like transition and put my bags down. Like I can do it from the comfort of my home. You don't even know if I'm wearing pants, right? No pants. But the thing is can you create space with people that you care about, that you feel safe with, and have some form of recurring space for that? For me, I am such a procrastinator. And I will not do anything unless I have a real deadline. I can't make up deadlines for myself. I can't be like, oh, I need to do this by Friday. If it's not a real deadline, my mind knows it's not a real deadline. So if I know, oh my God, I'm gonna meet up with my friends on Fridays, and we're just everyone's gonna get 5 minutes to share the work. You know, Thursday night, midnight, I am gonna be trying to like push something out. Whatever it takes to do the work. Some people can do it on their own. Great. And you want your safe space. For me, I get so much energy from other people, but also if they want critique, I'm here to give them critique. I want critique, right? And so the question is can you create a space of trust with people you really like and also have accountability? And for me, that's through a schedule.
Thank you, Susan, so much for just reminder of like reminding us to put in kind of it's not necessarily putting in the work, but it's just vocalizing what we really need and putting action and energy behind that. And I just wanted to note that like Izzy shared the resource to carry on thoughts for tonight from the BCSC Asian American Heritage Series. This is also a chance if anybody else wants to share in the chat other resources or groups that people are part of that in terms of like community groups, writing groups, just commiserating groups as well. And I know, Susan, you do something interesting on Wednesdays, I think I heard on your email. You want to throw in like a teaser to get on your list?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I have this thing called Weeflexion Wednesdays, and I have a whole bunch of Weeflexion Wabbits. And basically it happens every other Wednesday from 1 to 3 p.m. Pacific time. And we just join my Google Hangouts, and I say a quick hello, but then I work on the Pomodoro method, which is 25 minutes on, 5 minutes off, 25 minutes on, 5 minutes off. And we just like type in the chat what we're gonna do. And I encourage people, like, do something you've been meaning to work on that feels like the big that you don't want to work on, or do something that you're like, hey, I'm surrounded by all these other people that want to do something, you know, and there's just like support there, and we rally each other, and we support each other. So you can just get on my email list, and you can get the Google Hangout link, and it'll have all the dates and stuff. So Professor Nguyen, you can share that too. Gosh, there was something else there. Oh yes, every day I drop off my son at daycare. I don't say have a great day, Art. I say make it a great day. And then he's just like, because he can't talk yet, but he's like, and it's a reminder for me to also remember there are many things we cannot control, but we are still creators, and there are things that we can control, and we just got to start the day that way, you know. And just remember that we are in choice, because it's so easy to think that everything's crumbling around me, and you know, and not saying that those aren't real feelings, but how much can I be in that space of creation? And for me, I got to do it with friends. I got to do it with other people rallying me on, because sometimes if I choose to feel lonely, I will be very lonely and get very little done.
So on that note, I'm just going to just formally like conclude this first part of our section with our Q&A. I'm